The door splintered under his fist before she could finish the letter. Alara froze, ink dripping from her pen as the Duke of Ashford, soaked, furious, and very much not released from their engagement, filled the doorway like a storm given human form. "You think you can dissolve this with a paragraph?" His voice cut through the rain, hammering the windows. She'd written him freedom. He'd come to refuse it. And somewhere between the thunder and the way he looked at her, like she was the only solid thing in a world coming apart, Alara realized she'd made a catastrophic miscalculation. This man didn't want an escape. He wanted her. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. Hit that like button and settle in, because what happens next will rewrite everything you think you know about power, pride, and the woman who nearly gave it all away. The rain came down like it had a grudge. Alara Vance pressed her forehead against the cold window glass and watched London drown. Somewhere out there, carriages splashed through flooding streets. Gaslights flickered in the downpour. People with places to be and people waiting for them hurried past, collars turned up, lives intact. She had none of those things. The boarding house room smelled like mildew and someone else's cooking, onions probably, and something burnt. The wallpaper peeled at the corners, the bed sagged in the middle. But it was hers for another week, maybe 2 if she could convince Mrs. Hartley to wait on the rent. After that, she'd be on the street. 23 years old, no family worth claiming, no prospects, no plan B, just a letter. She turned back to the desk, if you could call it that. A plank balanced on 2 crates, one candle guttering in the draft, and a piece of paper that represented the last shred of dignity she had left. To His Grace, the Duke of Ashford, her handwriting looked steadier than her hands felt. "I release you from any obligation regarding our arranged engagement. You owe me nothing. Consider yourself free." Short, clean, no begging, no bitterness. She'd practiced it in her head for 3 days, whittling away every word that sounded like weakness, because if there was one thing Alara Vance refused to do, it was grovel to a man who'd been forced into an arrangement with her when they were children, a promise made between dying men, her father and his, back when the Vance name still meant something. That was before the debts, before the scandal, before her stepmother carved through what remained of the estate like a vulture with a legal claim. Dorian Hale didn't know her, had never met her, probably didn't remember her name half the time. And now he was a duke, powerful, titled, with the kind of influence that could crush her accidentally while reaching for his tea. She wasn't going to trap him, wasn't going to be the charity case some lord married out of obligation and resented for the rest of his life. Better to walk away now, before hope could take root and rot her from the inside. Alara signed her name, folded the letter, and sealed it with the last bit of wax she owned. The candle hissed, rain drummed against the roof. Somewhere below, Mrs. Hartley's voice rose in an argument with someone who probably also couldn't pay rent. She should feel relieved. She felt hollow. The clock on the mantel, a cheap ticking thing that ran 5 minutes fast, said 8:30. If she left now, she could post the letter before the last collection. By morning, it would be in his hands. By afternoon, she'd be officially, completely alone. Alara pulled on her cloak. It was thin, patched at the elbows, and did absolutely nothing against the cold. But it was all she had. She tucked the letter inside her bodice to keep it dry, checked the small coin purse at her wrist, 3 shillings, 2 pence, and stepped into the hallway. Mrs. Hartley's door was closed. Voices murmured behind it, low and tense. Alara moved quickly, boots soft on the stairs, and slipped out into the storm. The rain hit her like a wall. She pulled the cloak tighter and started walking, head down, toward the post office 6 blocks east. The streets were slick, the gutters overflowing. A carriage rattled past, spraying her with muddy water. She didn't flinch. What was a little more wet when you were already soaked? London at night wasn't kind to women alone. Alara kept to the lit streets, avoided eye contact, and moved with the kind of purpose that said, "I belong here, don't bother me." It usually worked. Tonight, the rain kept most people indoors anyway. The post office loomed ahead, a squat brick building with a lamp burning over the entrance. Alara pushed through the door, dripping onto the floor, and approached the counter. The clerk looked up, unimpressed. "Bit late for posting." "I know." She pulled out the letter, damp but intact. "Last collection?" 10 minutes. He took it, glanced at the address, and raised an eyebrow. Duke of Ashford, is it? Yes. Right. He stamped it, tossed it into a bin behind him. Anything else? No. She turned and left before he could ask questions. The rain hadn't let up. If anything, it was worse. Wind whipping through the streets now, tearing at her cloak, turning the downpour into something vicious. Alara pulled the hood up and started back the way she came. She made it 2 blocks before she saw the carriage. It was stopped in the middle of the street. Black lacquer, polished brass fittings, a crest on the door that she couldn't make out in the dark. The horses stood still, unbothered by the rain. The driver sat hunched on the box, collar up, waiting. Alara walked past, eyes down. Miss Vance? She stopped. The voice came from inside the carriage, low, steady, cutting through the storm like it didn't have to shout to be heard. She turned slowly. The door opened. A man stepped out into the rain, tall, broad-shouldered, dark coat buttoned to the throat, no hat, dark hair already slicked down by the downpour. He didn't flinch at the cold, didn't look uncomfortable. He looked like the storm was an inconvenience he'd simply decided not to acknowledge. Alara's breath caught. She knew who he was. She'd seen a portrait once, years ago, when her father was still alive. A younger version of this man, standing stiff in military dress, jaw set, eyes distant. Dorian Hale. Second son, sent off to war. The one nobody expected to inherit, until his brother died. And now here he was, Duke of Ashford, standing in the rain, looking at her like he'd been searching. Miss Vance, he said again. Not a question, a confirmation. She couldn't find her voice. He stepped closer. Water ran down his face, dripped from his jaw. He didn't wipe it away. I need to speak with you. Her throat was dry. I sent the letter. I know. Then you know I released you. You don't have to. I'm not here because I have to. He said it quietly, but there was steel underneath. I'm here because I choose to be. Alara stared at him. Rain pounded the cobblestones between them. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. The world kept moving, but this moment felt suspended, like if she said the wrong thing, it would shatter. You don't know me, she said finally. You don't owe me anything. No, he agreed. I don't. Then why? Because I've known who you are for 5 years. He didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. Every word landed like a stone. Because I watched you survive things that should have broken you. Because when your stepmother tried to erase you, you refused to disappear. And because when you finally had the chance to trap me into honoring a contract I never asked for, you let me go instead. She couldn't breathe. You think I don't notice that? Dorian took another step, close enough now that she could see the faint scar along his jaw, the tiredness around his eyes, the way he looked at her like she was a puzzle he'd been studying for years. You think I'm the kind of man who walks away from someone like you? I'm nobody. The words came out sharper than she meant. I have nothing, no family, no name, no, you have more spine than half the lords I know. He cut her off, not unkindly. And I didn't come here to debate your worth, Miss Vance. I came to make you an offer. I already, not the engagement. His gaze didn't waver. Something better. Alara's heart hammered against her ribs. What? Marry me. The rain roared. She laughed. She couldn't help it. A short, disbelieving sound that hurt her chest. You're insane. Probably. He didn't smile. But I'm also serious. You don't even know me. I know enough. You don't know anything. She was shaking now, and not from the cold. You don't know what I've done to survive. You don't know. I know you paid your father's debts when you didn't have to. His voice was quiet, relentless. I know you walked away from your stepmother's house with nothing because you wouldn't let her control you. I know you've been living in that boarding house for 8 months, working stitching jobs that pay almost nothing, and you still haven't begged, not once. Alara's throat closed. How? I pay attention. Dorian's jaw tightened. I've been paying attention since the day my father told me about the engagement, and every year since, I kept waiting for you to show up at my door demanding I honor it. You never did, so I waited and watched. And when I heard you were about to be evicted, I decided I was done waiting. You can't just... She shook her head, water flying. You can't just decide to marry someone because you feel sorry for them. I don't feel sorry for you. He said it like a fact. I respect you. There's a difference. Respect doesn't mean... It means I'm offering you a choice. Dorian stepped back, giving her space, but his eyes never left hers. 1 year. Marry me for 1 year. You'll have a home, security, a title. At the end of that year, if you want to leave, you walk away. No questions, no obligations. I'll settle an income on you that'll keep you comfortable for life, and you'll never have to see me again. And if I say no, then I leave. And you go back to that boarding house and figure out how to survive winter on 3 shillings. He didn't say it cruelly, just honest. But you won't ask me for help again, because that's not who you are. She hated that he was right. Why? The words scraped out of her. Why would you do this? Dorian was quiet for a long moment. Rain pooled at their feet. The carriage driver shifted on the box, pretending not to listen. Because I'm tired, he said finally, of duty, of performing, of pretending I care about the politics and the pageantry and all the things dukes are supposed to care about. I spent 10 years at war. I've seen what matters and what doesn't. And what matters is standing in front of me, soaked to the bone, too stubborn to accept help even when she's drowning. His voice softened, just slightly. I'm not asking you to love me, Miss Vance. I'm asking you to trust me. For 1 year. And if at the end of it you still want nothing to do with me, I'll let you go. But right now you need somewhere to be. And I need someone who isn't afraid to tell me the truth. Alara's hands were numb. Her mind was spinning. This was absurd. Impossible. Everything about it screamed trap. But when she looked at Dorian Hale, really looked, she didn't see pity. She didn't see arrogance. She saw exhaustion. And something else. Something that looked almost like hope. 1 year, she said slowly. 1 year. And then I'm free. Completely. She should say no. Should turn around and walk away and figure it out on her own, the way she always had. But winter was coming. And she was so tired of being cold. All right, Alara whispered. I'll do it. Dorian didn't smile, didn't gloat. He just nodded once, sharp and certain, and stepped aside. Get in the carriage. She hesitated for half a second. Then she climbed in, dripping water all over the plush interior, and sank into a seat that felt like a cloud compared to everything she'd known for the past year. Dorian followed, pulling the door shut behind him. The driver snapped the reins. The carriage lurched forward, and Alara Vance, the girl with nothing, rode through the rain toward a future she couldn't begin to imagine. The Ashford estate sat on the edge of the city like a fortress pretending to be a home. Stone walls, iron gates, windows that glowed warm against the storm. Alara stared at it through the carriage window and felt her stomach twist. Scared? Dorian asked. She glanced at him. He was watching her, expression unreadable. Terrified, she admitted. Good. He leaned back. Fear keeps you sharp. That's comforting. I'm not here to comfort you, Miss Vance. I'm here to make sure you survive. The carriage stopped. A footman appeared with an umbrella, but Dorian waved him off. He stepped out into the rain, then turned and offered Alara his hand. She took it. His grip was warm, steady. He didn't let go until they were inside. The entrance hall was enormous. Marble floors, high ceilings, a chandelier that probably cost more than her entire life. Staff appeared out of nowhere. Maids, footmen, a housekeeper with sharp eyes and a sharper expression. Your Grace. The housekeeper curtsied. Then her gaze slid to Alara, taking in the soaked cloak, the mud-splattered boots, the complete lack of anything resembling nobility. This is Miss Alara Vance, Dorian said, voice flat. She'll be staying here. Prepare the Duchess's suite. The housekeeper's eyebrows climbed. The Duchess's suite, Your Grace? Yes, but we'll be married within the week. He said it like he was ordering tea. Miss Vance will need a wardrobe, a lady's maid, and anything else she requires. Make the arrangements." The housekeeper opened her mouth, closed it, curtsied again. "Of course, Your Grace." She vanished, taking half the staff with her. The remaining footman stood rigid by the door, staring at nothing. Alara looked at Dorian. "You didn't have to—" "Yes, I did." He shrugged out of his coat, tossed it to the footman. "They need to know you're not temporary. If they think you're just some guest, they'll treat you like one. This way, they know. You're here to stay. For a year. They don't need to know that part." He glanced at her, something almost like amusement in his eyes. "Unless you plan to announce it?" "No." "Good." He started toward the stairs, then paused. "You should eat something and get dry. I'll have a tray sent up." "I'm fine." "You're shaking." She was. She hadn't noticed. Dorian sighed, ran a hand through his wet hair. "Miss Vance, Alara, you don't have to prove anything to me. Not tonight. Go upstairs, get warm. We'll talk in the morning." She wanted to argue, but the exhaustion was catching up, dragging at her limbs, turning her thoughts to sludge. "All right," she said quietly. He nodded. Then, to her surprise, he smiled, small, fleeting, but real. "Welcome home," Dorian said. And for the first time in years, Alara almost believed it. The Duchess's suite was obscene. Alara stood in the doorway and stared. Four-poster bed with silk curtains, a fireplace already crackling with heat, thick rugs, polished furniture, a sitting area with chairs that looked like they'd never been sat in. A door led to a bathing room, an actual bathing room, with a copper tub and running water and soaps that smelled like lavender. A young maid appeared at her elbow, eyes wide. "Miss Vance? I'm Annie. I'll be your lady's maid if that's all right?" Alara blinked at her. "I don't need—" "His Grace insists." Annie twisted her hands together. "Please, miss, I promise I won't be any trouble." She looked about 16, nervous, trying so hard to please. Alara softened. "It's fine, Annie. Thank you." The girl's face lit up. "Shall I draw you a bath, miss?" "Yes, please." Annie bustled off. Alara sank into one of the chairs and let the warmth seep into her bones. Her mind was still spinning, trying to catch up with everything that had happened in the past 2 hours. She'd written a letter to free a duke, and now she was sitting in his house, about to become his wife. It didn't feel real. The bath was ready. Alara peeled off her wet clothes. Annie took them away with a horrified expression, muttering about washing and mending, and sank into the water. It was perfect. Hot, clean, scented. She closed her eyes and let herself float. For 1 year, this was hers. After that, she'd figure it out. She always did. Dorian didn't sleep. He sat in his study, staring at the fire, turning a glass of whiskey in his hand. He hadn't touched it, didn't trust himself to stop at one. He'd done it, actually gone through with it, tracked her down, made the offer, brought her here. Now what? He didn't know. He just knew that when he'd read her letter, brief, polite, asking for nothing, something in his chest had cracked. Because of course she'd let him go. Of course she wouldn't fight for something she thought she didn't deserve. Alara Vance had spent her entire life being told she wasn't enough, by her stepmother, by society, by a world that measured worth in titles and dowries and bloodlines. And she'd believed it. Dorian set the glass down and leaned back, eyes closed. He'd spent 5 years watching her from a distance, learning who she was through reports, through observation, through the quiet attention of a man who knew what real strength looked like. She had it, in spades. She just didn't see it yet. But she would. He'd make sure of it, even if it took the whole damn year. Morning came cold and bright. Alara woke in a bed softer than clouds, wrapped in blankets that probably cost more than a year's rent. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then it all came rushing back. She sat up, heart pounding. Annie appeared almost immediately, carrying a tray. "Good morning, miss. I've brought tea and toast. His Grace thought you might be hungry." "Where is he?" "In his study, miss. He said to let you rest, but if you need him—" "I don't." Alara swung her legs out of bed. "I need clothes." Oh, yes, miss, we've sent for a modiste, but in the meantime I found a few things that might fit. Annie gestured toward the wardrobe. Alara opened it. Dresses. Dozens of them. Simple, elegant, clearly expensive. All in her size. How? His Grace had them made, miss, months ago. Annie said it like it was normal. Just in case. Alara's hand stilled on the fabric. He'd been planning this. For months. She didn't know whether to be flattered or furious. Maybe both. She dressed quickly, a deep blue gown that fit perfectly, and let Annie do something with her hair. Then she went downstairs. The house was alive now. Servants moving through hallways, voices echoing, the smell of breakfast drifting from somewhere. Alara followed it to a dining room roughly the size of her old house. Dorian sat at the head of the table, reading a newspaper. He looked up when she entered. "You're awake." "So are you." "Haven't slept." He folded the paper, gestured to the chair beside him. "Sit. Eat." She sat. A footman appeared with a plate. Eggs, toast, fruit, things she hadn't tasted in months. "You don't have to do this," Alara said quietly. "Do what?" "Feed me. Dress me. Pretend I belong here." Dorian set his coffee down. "I'm not pretending. Everyone else is. Then they'll learn." He met her eyes, steady and certain. "You're going to be my wife, Alara. That means something. To me, to this house, to everyone who works here. And if they don't understand that yet, they will." She wanted to argue, but the way he said it, like it was already decided, like her worth wasn't up for debate, made the words stick in her throat. "We're getting married in 3 days," Dorian continued. "Small ceremony, just us and the officiant. I don't do spectacle." "3 days? Unless you want longer?" "No." She picked up her fork, hands shaking slightly. 3 days is fine." "Good." He went back to his newspaper. "The modiste will be here this afternoon. Tell her what you need." "I don't need—" "You need everything, Alara, and you're going to let me give it to you." He didn't look up. "That's part of the deal." She bit back the instinct to refuse. "Fine." "Good." They ate in silence. It should have been awkward, but somehow it wasn't. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Alara felt safe. It terrified her. The modiste arrived at 2. A brisk, efficient woman named Madame Clairmont, who took one look at Alara and started measuring without asking permission. "You'll need day dresses, evening gowns, riding habits, walking costumes." She rattled off a list that made Alara's head spin. "And of course, a wedding dress." "Something simple," Alara said. "Simple." Madame Clairmont's mouth twitched. "His Grace said you'd say that." "And?" "And he said to ignore you." She pulled out a sketchbook, flipped it open. "What do you think of this?" The dress was beautiful. Ivory silk, delicate lace, elegant without being fussy. "It's—" Alara's throat tightened. "It's perfect." "Good." Madame Clairmont snapped the book shut. "I'll have it ready in 2 days." She swept out, leaving Alara standing in the middle of the room, feeling like her life was being rearranged by forces she couldn't control. Maybe it was. Maybe that was all right. She was still thinking about it when Dorian found her an hour later, standing by the window in the library. "Surviving?" he asked. "Barely." He almost smiled. "It gets easier." "Does it?" "No." He moved to stand beside her, looking out at the gardens. "But you get used to it." They stood in silence. Outside, the rain had stopped. Weak sunlight filtered through the clouds. "Why did you really do this?" Alara asked quietly. "The truth." Dorian was quiet for a long time. "Because I'm tired of being alone," he said finally. "And you looked like you were too." It was the most honest thing anyone had ever said to her. Alara turned to face him. He was still looking out the window, jaw tight, shoulders tense. "I don't know how to be a duchess," she said. "I don't know how to be a husband." He met her eyes. "But I think we can figure it out, if we're honest with each other." "Just honesty?" "Just honesty." He held out his hand. "Deal?" She looked at it, then at him. And for the second time in 2 days, Alara Vance made a choice that should have terrified her. She took his hand. Deal. The deal lasted exactly 48 hours before the first crack appeared. Alara was in the morning room, pretending to read a book she couldn't focus on, when the housekeeper appeared in the doorway. Mrs. Davison, that was her name, thin-lipped, steel-spined, the kind of woman who could make you feel small without saying a word. Miss Vance, not a greeting, a summons. Alara looked up. Yes? His Grace has requested your presence in the drawing room. There are guests. The way she said guests made it clear they weren't the welcome kind. Alara set the book down. Who? Lady Pemberton and her daughter. Mrs. Davison's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Warning, maybe. They've come to call on His Grace. Of course they had. News traveled fast in London, especially news involving a duke and a sudden engagement to nobody. The vultures were circling already. I'll be right there, Alara said. Mrs. Davison nodded and left. Alara stood, smoothed down the green day dress that still felt too fine, too expensive, and walked toward the drawing room like she was heading into battle. Because she was. She heard them before she saw them. High, bright laughter. The kind that was meant to carry, to announce presence and importance. Alara paused in the doorway. The drawing room was full of light, tall windows, cream walls, furniture arranged in perfect symmetry. Dorian sat in a chair near the fireplace, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Across from him, 2 women held court. Lady Pemberton was in her 40s, draped in silk and jewels, with the kind of beauty that required effort and money to maintain. Her daughter, 18, maybe 19, was a younger, softer version. Blonde curls, pink cheeks, wide eyes that kept darting to Dorian like he was a prize she'd already won. Your Grace, you simply must attend the Haverford Ball next week, Lady Pemberton was saying. Everyone will be there. It would be such a statement for you to... Oh. She'd seen Alara. The room went silent. Dorian stood immediately. Miss Vance? His voice was even, but his eyes said, I'm sorry. Allow me to introduce Lady Pemberton and her daughter, Miss Caroline Pemberton. Lady Pemberton's smile didn't reach her eyes. Miss Vance? How unexpected. For both of us, Alara said smoothly. She moved into the room, sat in the chair beside Dorian without waiting for an invitation. I wasn't aware we were expecting company. Oh, we're old friends of the family. Lady Pemberton waved a hand, dismissive. I knew the late Duke quite well. And of course, Caroline and His Grace have known each other since childhood. Caroline blushed prettily. It's been ages, Your Grace. I was so pleased to hear you'd returned to London. Returned and engaged, Dorian said. Flat, final. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Yes, Lady Pemberton's smile tightened. We heard. Such a whirlwind romance. Not really, Alara said. We've been promised to each other for years. His Grace simply decided it was time to honor the arrangement. It wasn't quite a lie. Close enough. Lady Pemberton's eyes narrowed. How quaint. And your family, Miss Vance, I don't believe I'm familiar with... Her family isn't your concern, Dorian interrupted. His tone was polite, but there was steel underneath. And we're quite busy preparing for the wedding, so if you'll excuse us... The wedding. Caroline leaned forward, all enthusiasm. When is it? You must let us help. Mother is wonderful at organizing events, aren't you, Mother? I'm sure Miss Vance has everything well in hand, Lady Pemberton said. Her gaze raked over Alara, taking in every detail, cataloging every flaw. Though if you need guidance navigating society, my dear, do feel free to call on me. It can be so daunting for those unfamiliar with our circles. The condescension was thick enough to choke on. Alara smiled. That's very kind, but I think I'll manage. Of course. Lady Pemberton stood, gathering her gloves. Well, we shouldn't keep you. Come, Caroline. His Grace has much to attend to, I'm sure. Caroline rose reluctantly, casting one last longing look at Dorian. It was lovely seeing you, Your Grace. Lady Pemberton. Miss Pemberton. Dorian didn't move, didn't smile, just waited for them to leave. They did, finally, with a flurry of silk and false warmth. The door closed. Alara exhaled. That, Dorian said quietly, is what you're up against. I noticed. He turned to look at her. They'll come at you from every angle. Question your background, your breeding, your right to be here. And that was subtle compared to what's coming. You're really selling this marriage, Alara said dryly. His mouth twitched, almost a smile. I'm preparing you. There's a difference. Do they all hate me already, or just her? She doesn't hate you. Dorian moved to the window, looking out at the gardens. She's afraid of you. Why? I'm nobody. Exactly. He glanced back to Mem. You're unpredictable. You didn't come from their world, so you don't play by their rules. That makes you dangerous. Alara laughed, sharp and bitter. I'm not dangerous. I'm just trying to survive. Same thing, Dorian said. In their world. She studied him, the tension in his shoulders, the way he stood like he was bracing for impact. You really hate this, don't you? The society, the politics, all of it. Yes. Then why stay? Because walking away means abandoning everything my brother built. Everyone who depends on this estate, this title. He turned fully to face her. I didn't want this, Alara, but it's mine now. And I won't let it fall apart because I'm tired of performing. There was something raw in his voice, something that made her chest ache. You don't have to do this alone, she said quietly. I know. He held her gaze. That's why you're here. The wedding was on a Thursday. Gray skies, no rain, just cold autumn air that smelled like smoke and dying leaves. The chapel was small, tucked away on the estate grounds, old stone and stained glass that threw colored light across the floor. Alara stood in the doorway, wearing the ivory dress Madame Clairmont had made, and tried to remember how to breathe. Annie fussed with the veil. You look beautiful, miss. I look terrified. That too. Annie stepped back, eyes shining, but mostly beautiful. There was no music, no guests, just the officiant, an old vicar with kind eyes, and Dorian, waiting at the altar in a dark suit that made him look like he'd walked out of a painting. He saw her and went very still. Alara walked toward him, each step echoing in the quiet space. No father to give her away. No family watching, just her and this choice and the man who'd offered her a way out of the cold. She reached him. He held out his hand. She took it. The ceremony was quick, vows that felt too big for her mouth, promises she wasn't sure she could keep. A ring, simple gold, warm against her skin, that Dorian slid onto her finger with steady hands. I now pronounce you husband and wife. Dorian leaned in, brushed his lips against hers. Brief, chaste, a formality. But his hand tightened on hers just for a second, and Alara felt the weight of it settle over her. She was married. She was a duchess, and she had absolutely no idea what happened next. What happened next was a dinner party. You're joking, Alara said. I wish I was. Dorian stood in the library holding a stack of invitations like they personally offended him. Apparently the Earl of Blackstone thinks it would be good for us to make a public appearance, show a united front, prove to society that our marriage is legitimate. Who cares what society thinks? Everyone, unfortunately. He tossed the invitations onto the desk. Blackstone is one of the few peers I actually respect. If he's asking, it's because the whispers are getting loud enough that they'll cause problems if we don't address them. Alara sank into a chair. They'd been married for 3 days. 3 quiet, strange days of navigating a house that still didn't feel like hers. Meals shared in near silence, nights spent in separate rooms because apparently Dorian was a gentleman, even in a marriage of convenience. What kind of problems? She asked. The kind that question whether this marriage is legal, whether you coerced me, whether I'm fit to hold the title if I'm making decisions this erratic. He sat on the edge of the desk, arms crossed. It's all noise, but noise gets loud enough, it becomes reality. So we go to a dinner party and smile and pretend we're madly in love. Something like that. Alara looked at him. I don't know how to do that. Do what? Pretend, perform, be the kind of wife they expect. Dorian's expression softened. Then don't. Be yourself. That's all I'm asking. Myself got sneered at by Lady Pemberton. Lady Pemberton is a viper. You handled her fine. He pushed off the desk, moved closer. Listen to me. You're stronger than you think you are, and you're smarter than half the people in that room will ever be. So go in there, hold your head up, and let them see exactly who they're dealing with. A girl from nowhere with no money and no name? My wife, Dorian said quietly. That's who you are now, and anyone who doesn't respect that can answer to me. The fierceness in his voice startled her. You really mean that? She said. Every word. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that this fragile thing they'd built could hold up under scrutiny, but belief was a luxury she'd never been able to afford. When is it? She asked. Tomorrow night. Of course it is. Elara stood, smoothed her skirts. I'll need a dress. Madame Clairmont already sent one. It's in your room. He hesitated. You don't have to do this if you're not ready. I'm never going to be ready. She met his eyes. But I made a deal. 1 year. I'm not backing out after 3 days. Something flickered across his face. Respect, maybe. Or relief. Then we'll do it together, Dorian said. The Earl of Blackstone's London residence was a monument to old money. Marble columns, gilded everything, rooms so large they echoed. Elara stepped out of the carriage on Dorian's arm and felt every eye in the vicinity turn toward her. The whispers started immediately. That's her? I heard she was a seamstress. No family at all, apparently. What was he thinking? Dorian's jaw tightened, but he kept walking. Elara forced herself to breathe, to smile, to act like she belonged. The Earl met them at the entrance, late 50s, silver hair, sharp eyes that missed nothing. Ashford, good to see you. Blackstone. Dorian shook his hand. May I present my wife, Elara? Your Grace. Blackstone bowed over her hand. A pleasure. Welcome. His tone was polite, neutral. Elara couldn't tell if he approved or was just too well-bred to show disapproval. Thank you for the invitation, she said. Of course, please, come in. Dinner will be served shortly. They followed him inside. The drawing room was full of people, lords and ladies in their finest, champagne glasses catching the light, conversation flowing like a river Elara couldn't navigate. Dorian stayed close, his hand at the small of her back, steady and grounding. Ashford! A booming voice cut through the chatter. A man approached, tall, broad, ruddy-faced. Heard you'd finally tied the knot. About time. Lord Hathaway, Dorian said evenly. May I introduce? The mysterious bride, yes, yes. Hathaway's gaze swept over Elara like she was livestock at market. Pretty enough. Good breeding? Elara's smile froze. Her breeding, Dorian said, voice dropping to something cold, is none of your concern. Hathaway blinked. Just making conversation, old boy. Make it elsewhere. The man's face reddened. He muttered something and stalked off. Elara exhaled slowly. You're going to make enemies doing that. I already have enemies. Dorian's hand tightened slightly on her back. What's a few more? The dinner bell rang. They filed into the dining room, a table that could seat 30, place cards in elaborate script, more silverware than Elara had ever seen in one place. She was seated between Dorian and a thin, pinched woman who introduced herself as Lady Wycliffe. Across the table, Lady Pemberton smiled like a cat with a canary. This was going to be a long night. The first course arrived. Elara picked up what she hoped was the right fork. So, Duchess, Lady Wycliffe said, voice saccharine, tell us about your family. I don't believe we've had the pleasure of knowing them. Here it was, the interrogation. My father passed several years ago, Elara said carefully. He was a gentleman of modest means. How tragic. And your mother? Also deceased. Oh dear, no siblings? No. So you're quite alone in the world. Lady Wycliffe took a delicate sip of wine. How fortunate that His Grace took pity on you. The words hit like a slap. Elara's hand stilled on her silverware. Beside her, Dorian went rigid. I didn't take pity on anyone, he said, voice like ice. I married the woman I chose to marry, for reasons that are entirely my own. Of course, Your Grace. Lady Wycliffe's smile didn't waver. I simply meant that it must be quite overwhelming for someone of forgive me, Her Grace's background to navigate society. She's navigating it just fine, Dorian said. I'm sure. Lady Pemberton leaned forward, eyes gleaming. Though I do wonder, Duchess, how you and His Grace met. It's such a romantic story, I'm sure. Translation. Tell us the truth so we can pick it apart. Elara met her gaze. We were promised to each other as children, by our fathers. His Grace honored that promise when he returned to London. How traditional, Lady Pemberton said. And you simply waited all these years for him to claim you? I didn't wait for anything. The words came out sharper than Elara intended. I lived my life. And when His Grace made his intentions clear, I made a choice. A choice? Lady Wycliffe's eyebrows climbed. How modern. Isn't it? Elara picked up her wineglass, took a deliberate sip. I believe women should have choices. Don't you? The table went very quiet. Lady Pemberton's smile turned brittle. Of course, though some choices are wiser than others. I agree. Elara set her glass down, met the woman's eyes. For instance, choosing to respect someone's marriage rather than questioning it at a dinner party strikes me as particularly wise. Dorian coughed into his napkin. It sounded suspiciously like a laugh. Lady Pemberton's face flushed. I didn't mean to imply— Of course you didn't, Elara said sweetly. I'm sure it was just curiosity. The conversation moved on, stilted and awkward. Elara focused on her food, on breathing, on not letting them see how much her hands were shaking. When dessert finally arrived, she thought they might escape unscathed. Then Lady Pemberton struck again. Your Grace, she said, addressing Dorian, I've been meaning to ask, have you given any thought to heirs? It's so important for the title, after all. Elara's fork clattered against her plate. Dorian's expression went flat. That's a private matter. Of course, but surely with such a sudden marriage, one wonders if perhaps— One should wonder less, Dorian said, voice deadly quiet, and mind their own affairs more. The Earl cleared his throat. Perhaps we should adjourn to the drawing room? Everyone stood gratefully. Elara moved on autopilot, following the women while the men retreated to wherever men retreated to drink brandy and talk politics. The drawing room felt like a trap. Elara took a seat near the window, trying to look composed while her heart hammered. Lady Pemberton materialized beside her. You'll have to forgive our curiosity, Duchess. It's just that Ashford has been such a catch for so long. Every mother with a daughter had hopes. Then they'll be disappointed, Elara said. Clearly, the older woman smiled, though one does wonder how long such an unusual arrangement will last. Elara looked at her, really looked, and saw it clearly, the desperation under the polish, the fear that her daughter's best chance had just been snatched away by someone unworthy. As long as it needs to, Elara said quietly, which is longer than you'll be waiting for it to fail. Lady Pemberton's expression hardened. You have no idea what you've walked into, girl. This world will chew you up and spit you out. And when it does, don't expect His Grace to protect you. Men like him marry for duty. They love elsewhere. The words cut deeper than they should have, because part of Elara knew they might be true. Maybe, she said, but that's between him and me, not you. She stood and walked away before Lady Pemberton could respond. The carriage ride home was silent. Dorian stared out the window, jaw tight. Elara folded her hands in her lap and tried not to feel like she'd just survived a war. You did well, he said finally. I insulted half the room. They deserved it. He turned to look at her. And you held your ground. That takes courage. Or stupidity. Sometimes they're the same thing. Elara laughed, short and sharp. This is only going to get worse, isn't it? Probably. Great. They pulled up to the house. Dorian helped her out, his hand warm and solid. They walked inside together, past the servants, up the stairs. At her door, he paused. Thank you, he said. For what? For not running. His eyes searched hers. You could have. After tonight. After seeing what this really is. But you didn't. We have a deal, Elara said softly. 1 year. Right. Something flickered across his face. Disappointment, maybe, or hope. 1 year. He stepped back, turned to go. Dorian. He stopped. She was wrong, Alara said. Lady Pemberton. About you. About this. Was she? Yes. Alara didn't know why she was so certain, but she was. Whatever this is, it's real. Maybe not in the way they think, but it's real. Dorian looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded once, sharp and final. Good night, Alara. Good night. She watched him walk away, then went into her room and closed the door. Her hands were still shaking, but for the first time since this all began, she wasn't sure if it was from fear or something else entirely. The note arrived 3 days later. Alara was having tea in the morning room when Annie brought it in, nervous and pale. This just came for you, Your Grace, by messenger. Alara took it, no seal, no return address, just her name in handwriting she recognized instantly. Her stomach dropped. She waited until Annie left, then opened it. My dear Alara, I hear congratulations are in order. A duchess. How impressive. I do hope His Grace knows what he's gotten himself into. Perhaps we should discuss it in person. I'll be calling tomorrow at 2. Your loving stepmother, Margaret. The paper crumpled in Alara's fist. Margaret. Here, coming to this house. She stood, paced to the window, back again. Her mind raced. Margaret hadn't contacted her in over a year, not since Alara had walked out of that house with nothing, choosing the street over another day under that woman's roof. And now she was coming here. Why? The answer was obvious. Money. Status. Whatever she thought she could extract from Alara's sudden good fortune. Alara's chest tightened with rage and something worse, fear. Because Margaret had always known exactly where to strike, exactly what words would cut deepest. And Alara wasn't sure she was strong enough to face her. Not yet. Not here. The door opened. Dorian stepped in, saw her face, and went still. What happened? Alara handed him the note without a word. He read it. His expression went cold. She's not coming here. She is. Tomorrow. Then I'll have her turned away at the door. You can't. Alara shook her head. She'll make a scene. Tell everyone you're keeping her from her daughter. Twist it into something ugly. Let her try. You don't understand. Alara's voice cracked. Margaret doesn't fight fair. She'll smile and play the victim and make me look like the villain. She's been doing it for years. Dorian set the note down, moved closer. Then we don't let her. We face her together. And we make it very clear that whatever power she had over you is gone. It's not that simple. Yes, it is. He caught her chin gently, making her look at him. You're not alone anymore, Alara. You're not that girl she could push around and control. You're a duchess, my wife. And if she comes here thinking she can hurt you, she's going to learn exactly what that means. Alara's throat burned. What if I can't do it? What if I see her and just break? You won't. You don't know that. Yes, Dorian said quietly. I do. The certainty in his voice steadied her, just enough. Tomorrow at 2, she whispered. Tomorrow at 2, he agreed. And this time, she doesn't win. Alara wanted to believe him. But when she closed her eyes, all she could see was Margaret's smile, sharp and cold and absolutely certain of victory. Alara didn't sleep that night. She sat by the window in her room, watching the moon track across the sky, and tried to remember how to breathe without her chest feeling like it was caving in. Margaret. The name alone brought back everything. The cold dinners where every word was a test, the locked doors and missed meals when Alara didn't perform to standard. The slow, systematic dismantling of everything her father had left her, sold off piece by piece, always with a reason that sounded logical until you looked closer and saw the lie underneath. And the smile. That terrible, patient smile that said, I own you, and there's nothing you can do about it. Alara pressed her forehead against the glass. The garden below was silver dark, peaceful, nothing like the chaos in her head. She'd been 17 when her father died, 17 and stupid enough to believe that Margaret would take care of her, honor the marriage vows she'd spoken at his bedside. Instead, she'd waited exactly 3 months before the first piece of jewelry went missing. then the furniture, then the house itself, signed over in documents Alara never saw until it was too late. By the time she understood what was happening, she had nothing left. No money, no home, no proof that any of it had ever been hers. Just Margaret's word against hers. And whose word carried weight, the respectable widow or the difficult stepdaughter? Alara had learned fast which battles she couldn't win, so she'd stopped fighting and started surviving instead. Until now. Now she had something Margaret wanted. Status, access, the reflected glory of being connected to a duke. And Margaret would do whatever it took to get it. The door opened softly behind her. Alara didn't turn. "You should be asleep," Dorian said. "Can't." He moved to stand beside her, looking out at the same view. He was still dressed, shirt rolled to the elbows, hair disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it. "Neither can I, apparently," he said. They stood in silence for a moment. Outside, an owl called, lonely and distant. "Tell me about her," Dorian said finally. "Your stepmother. What am I walking into tomorrow?" Alara's throat tightened. She's smart, calculated. She doesn't lose her temper or make mistakes. Everything she does is planned 3 moves ahead. Sounds familiar. His mouth quirked slightly. Military training does that to you. This isn't war, isn't it? Dorian glanced at her. She's coming here to take something from you. Doesn't matter if it's money or control or just the satisfaction of watching you squirm. That's a battle. And battles have strategies. What's yours? Let her make the first move, see what she wants, then cut her off at the knees before she can take it. He said it calmly, like they were discussing the weather. But I need to know what ammunition she has, what she'll use against you. Alara's hands curled into fists. Everything. My father's debts, the way I left, every mistake I made trying to survive after. She paused. She'll make it sound like I'm the problem, like I'm ungrateful, unstable, not fit to be anyone's wife. And is any of that true? Parts of it. Alara forced herself to meet his eyes. I'm not some perfect victim, Dorian. I fought back when I could, said things I shouldn't have, made choices that probably looked reckless to anyone watching. Good. She blinked. What? If you'd just rolled over and taken it, you'd be dead or broken by now. The fact that you fought means you're still here. Dorian's expression was fierce. Whatever she says tomorrow, remember that. You survived her. That's not weakness. It's strength. Doesn't feel like it. It never does. He turned fully toward her. Listen to me. When she walks into this house tomorrow, she's not walking into your past. She's walking into my territory. And the rules are different here. You're not alone. You're not powerless. And if she tries to hurt you, she'll have to go through me first. The certainty in his voice made something crack open in Alara's chest. Why do you care so much? She whispered. This wasn't part of the deal. Dorian was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. Because I know what it's like to be trapped by people who should protect you. My father was a bastard, cared more about the title than the people carrying it. And when my brother died, everyone expected me to just step into that role, be him, want what he wanted. He shook his head. I didn't. I wanted out. But walking away meant leaving people behind who needed me. So you stayed. So I stayed. His jaw tightened, and I made a promise to myself. If I had to do this, be the Duke, play the game, I'd do it on my terms, with people I chose, people who wanted to be here, not because they were forced. Is that what I am? Alara asked. A choice? Yes. Dorian held her gaze. You are. And tomorrow, we make sure she understands that. Alara wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that this fragile thing they'd built could hold up against Margaret's sharp edges. But belief was dangerous. Belief got you hurt. Still, she nodded. All right, tomorrow. Tomorrow, Dorian agreed. He left her there, standing in the moonlight, feeling slightly less alone than she had an hour ago. It would have to be enough. 2 o'clock came too fast. Alara stood in the drawing room, dressed in deep burgundy. Dorian's suggestion, something about projecting authority, and tried not to feel like she was waiting for an execution. Dorian sat in the chair by the fireplace, looking relaxed, but Alara could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his fingers drummed once against the armrest before going still. Mrs. Davison appeared in the doorway. "Mrs. Margaret Vance, to see you, Your Grace." Alora's stomach dropped. "Show her in," Dorian said. Margaret swept into the room like she owned it. She'd always been beautiful in a cold, precise way. Blonde hair perfectly arranged, clothes expensive but understated, every movement calculated for maximum effect. Today she wore dove gray, widow's colors, with just enough jewelry to look tasteful. Her eyes found Alara immediately, and she smiled. "Alara, darling, look at you." It wasn't a compliment. It was an assessment, and Alara could see the gears turning behind those pale blue eyes, cataloging the dress, the setting, the man sitting across the room. "Margaret," Alara kept her voice level, "this is unexpected." "Is it? I am your stepmother, dear. Of course I'd want to offer my congratulations on your marriage." Margaret turned to Dorian, curtsied gracefully. "Your Grace, I'm so pleased to finally meet you. Alara has spoken of you often over the years." Lie. Smooth and practiced. Dorian stood, inclined his head. "Mrs. Vance, please, sit." Margaret settled into a chair like she was granting them a favor. Alara remained standing, unwilling to give up the higher ground. "I must say, Your Grace, when I heard the news, I was quite shocked." Margaret's smile widened. "Our dear Alara, married to a duke, it's like something out of a storybook." "Hardly," Dorian said. "We were promised to each other years ago. I simply honored that arrangement." "How noble of you." Margaret's gaze slid to Alara. "Though I do worry, you know. Alara can be so impulsive. I hope she's made clear to you the circumstances of her upbringing. I'd hate for there to be any misunderstandings." There it was. The first strike. "Her upbringing," Dorian said carefully, "is her own business, not yours." "Of course. I simply mean that after her father's death, things were quite difficult. So many debts, you understand. I did my best to manage, but Alara was young and—" Margaret sighed, delicate and pained. "Well, she didn't always make wise choices." Alara's nails bit into her palms. "You sold everything." "I managed the estate as best I could under impossible circumstances." Margaret's voice was gentle, reasonable, the voice of someone trying to help. "Your father left us in ruins, dear. I had to make difficult decisions." "You forged documents." The words hung in the air like a blade. Margaret's smile didn't falter. "I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do." Alara stepped forward, heart hammering. "The deed to the house, the jewelry. All of it should have been held in trust until I was 21. But somehow it all ended up in your name instead. Because your father changed his will before he died." Margaret's expression was all sympathy. "I know it's hard to accept, but he wanted to ensure I was taken care of. Surely you don't begrudge me that." "He never changed anything." Alara's voice shook. "You did, and you know it." Margaret turned to Dorian, eyes wide and wounded. "Your Grace, I apologize for this. Alara has always had such a vivid imagination, and I'm afraid losing her father at such a young age affected her deeply. She's been unstable at times." "She seems perfectly stable to me," Dorian said. His tone was mild, but his eyes were ice. "Of course you'd think so. You've only just met her." Margaret leaned forward, confidential. "But I've known her for years, and I have to warn you, she can be manipulative when she wants something. I'd hate to see you taken advantage of." Alara's chest constricted. This was it. The moment where Margaret painted her as crazy, grasping, unworthy, where everything Alara said would be dismissed as delusion or lies. But Dorian didn't look convinced. He looked curious. "Manipulative how?" he asked. Margaret hesitated, just for a second. "Well, she's always been very good at playing the victim, making herself seem helpless to gain sympathy." "Funny." Dorian stood, moved to stand beside Alara. "Because when I met her, she was releasing me from our engagement, trying to set me free. That doesn't sound manipulative. That sounds like someone with more integrity than most people I know." Margaret's smile froze. "In fact," Dorian continued, voice soft and deadly, "the only person in this room who seems to be manipulating anyone is you." "I beg your pardon?" You walked in here with a story already prepared, every word calculated to make Alara look unstable, and yourself the long-suffering victim. But you made a mistake. What mistake? Margaret's composure was cracking, just slightly. Dorian pulled a folded paper from his jacket pocket. Assuming I hadn't done my research, he handed it to Alara. She unfolded it with shaking hands. It was a legal document, old, yellowed at the edges, her father's will, the real one. Where did you? Alara's voice broke. My solicitor. I had him investigate your family's estate records the day after we got engaged. Dorian looked at Margaret. Turns out there were 2 wills filed, one in London, one in the county registrar's office where your father died. They don't match. Margaret went very still. The London version, the one you presented, leaves everything to you. Dorian's voice was relentless. The county version puts everything in trust for Alara until she turned 21, signed and witnessed 6 months before your father's death, which makes the London version a forgery. The room went silent. Alara stared at the paper in her hands. This was real, proof, everything she'd known in her gut but could never prove. You can't, Margaret started. I can. Dorian cut her off. And I have. My solicitor has already filed the paperwork to have the forgery investigated. If it's proven false, and we both know it will be, you'll be charged with fraud. Margaret's face went white, then red. You have no right. I have every right. She's my wife, which means her interests are mine now. Dorian stepped closer to Margaret, and despite the 6 inches he had on her, she seemed to shrink. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to sign over everything you stole. The house, the jewelry, the investments, all of it. And you're going to do it quietly, without scandal. And if I refuse, then I make this public. Every stolen penny, every forged signature, every lie you've told over the past 6 years. And when I'm done, you won't just lose the money. You'll lose your reputation, your standing, everything you've built on Alara's back. His voice dropped. Your choice. Margaret's hands clenched in her lap. Her perfect composure was completely shattered now, replaced by something ugly and desperate. You think you've won, she hissed, glaring at Alara. But you're still the same scared little girl I took in, still weak, still nothing without someone protecting you. Alara felt the words hit like they always did, like they were true. But then Dorian's hand found hers. Warm, steady, and something shifted. Maybe I was that girl, Alara said quietly, but I'm not anymore. And you don't get to define me anymore. Margaret's eyes blazed. You're making a mistake, both of you. This marriage won't last, and when it falls apart, and it will, you'll have nothing again, and I won't be there to save you this time. I don't need saving, Alara said. I need you gone. Margaret stood abruptly. Fine. I'll sign your papers. But don't think this is over. It is, Dorian said. It's been over since the moment you walked into this house and underestimated my wife. Margaret's jaw worked. Then she turned and walked out without another word, spine rigid with fury. The door closed. Alara's legs gave out. She sank into the nearest chair, the will still clutched in her hands. She's right, you know, she whispered. About what? This marriage. It won't last. 1 year, remember? And then I'll be alone again. Dorian knelt in front of her. You'll never be alone again. Even if we end this arrangement, you'll have your inheritance back, financial security, a future. He covered her hands with his. And you'll have the knowledge that you stood up to her, that you won. We won. Alara looked at him. I couldn't have done this without you. Yes, you could have. You just didn't have the tools yet. Now you do. She wanted to kiss him. The urge was sudden and overwhelming and terrifying. Instead, she gripped his hands tighter. Thank you. You don't have to thank me. Yes, Alara said. I do. They stayed like that for a long moment. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, turning the room gold. Then Dorian stood. She'll sign the papers. Probably within the week. My solicitor will handle it. And then what? Then you decide what to do with it all. Keep it, sell it, burn it to the ground. I don't care, it's yours. Finally. Alara looked down at the will in her hands. Proof that her father had cared, had wanted her protected, had loved her. "I want to see it," she said suddenly. "See what?" "The house, where I grew up, before she took it." Alara stood, energized by something she couldn't name. "I want to go there. Now." Dorian studied her. "Are you sure?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway." His mouth quirked. "All right. I'll have the carriage brought around." Ishan. The house looked smaller than Alara remembered. It sat on the edge of Mayfair, red brick and white trim, elegant but not ostentatious. The windows were dark. A for let sign hung by the gate. Alara stood on the sidewalk staring. "She couldn't even keep it occupied," Dorian said quietly beside her. "She didn't want to live here. She just didn't want me to have it." Alara's throat burned. Everything she did was about control, not need, just power. "Do you want to go in?" Did she? Part of her wanted to run, to never see the inside of this place again, never walk those halls where her father had died and Margaret had slowly dismantled everything good. But another part, the part that had survived, that had fought, wanted to face it, to prove she could. "Yes," Alara said. Dorian spoke to the estate agent's office nearby. 10 minutes later, they had a key. The door creaked when it opened. Inside, the house was empty. No furniture, no rugs, just bare floors and walls with faded squares where paintings used to hang. Alara walked through slowly. The parlor where her father used to read to her. The dining room where Margaret had held her terrible, silent dinners. The stairs she'd climbed every night to a room that never felt safe. It was just a house now. Empty. Powerless. "She can't hurt me here anymore," Alara whispered. Dorian stood in the doorway, watching her. "No, she can't." Alara turned in a slow circle, taking it all in. Then she started to laugh. Not hysterical, just free. "What?" Dorian asked. "I spent years being terrified of this place, of her, and now I'm standing here and all I feel is nothing. She's just a person, a cruel, petty person, but not a monster." Alara wiped her eyes. "I gave her so much power over me. For nothing." "Not for nothing." Dorian moved closer. "You were protecting yourself the only way you knew how. That's not weakness." It felt like it. It wasn't. He reached out, brushed a tear from her cheek. "You're one of the strongest people I've ever met, Alara. You just needed to see it for yourself." His hand lingered, warm against her skin. Alara's breath caught. They were alone. In an empty house, standing too close, and something in the air shifted. "Dorian?" The front door slammed open. They sprang apart. Margaret stood in the doorway, flanked by two men Alara didn't recognize. Her face was a mask of cold fury. "I knew you'd come here," she said. "You always were predictable." Dorian stepped in front of Alara. "What do you want?" "What's mine?" Margaret's smile was poison. "You think you can threaten me? Blackmail me? I've been playing this game longer than you've been alive, boy." "This isn't a game." "Everything's a game." Margaret gestured and the two men moved forward, large, threatening. "And you just made a very stupid move." Alara's heart slammed against her ribs. "What are you doing?" "What I should have done years ago." Margaret's eyes glittered. "Getting rid of the problem, both of you, unfortunately. But accidents happen. Tragic, really. A young couple exploring an abandoned property, a collapse, a fire." She shrugged. "Who's to say what happened?" "You're insane," Dorian said. "I'm practical." Margaret nodded to the men. "Make it quick." They lunged. Dorian moved faster. He caught the first man with an elbow to the throat, sent him crashing into the wall. The second swung wild. Dorian ducked, came up with a fist that connected with brutal precision. But there were two of them, and one of him. Alara looked around frantically. No weapons. Nothing but the fireplace poker. She grabbed it, swung hard. It connected with the second man's skull with a sickening crack. He went down. Dorian finished the first with a knee to the gut, then a blow that left him unconscious on the floor. Silence. Margaret stood frozen in the doorway, eyes wide. Dorian straightened, breathing hard. Blood trickled from a split lip. "You done?" Margaret's composure shattered completely. She turned to run. "Don't," Alara said. Margaret froze. Alara walked forward slowly, still holding the poker. Her hands were steady. Her voice was ice. "You're going to sign the papers," she said. "All of them. And then you're going to leave London. If I ever see you again, if you ever contact me or try to come near my husband, I will make sure everyone knows exactly what you did here today. Attempted murder, conspiracy, all of it. You can't prove. We have witnesses." Dorian gestured to the men on the floor. "And I'm a duke. My word carries weight. Yours doesn't." Margaret's face crumpled, not with remorse, with defeat. "I gave you everything," she spat at Alara. "Took you in when you had nothing." "You took everything," Alara corrected. "And now I'm taking it back." Margaret's shoulders sagged. "Fine, I'll sign." "Today," Dorian said, "at my solicitor's office, with witnesses." Margaret nodded once, bitter and broken. Dorian hauled one of the men up by his collar. "And take your hired thugs with you. If they try this again, they'll be charged alongside you." The men stumbled out, followed by Margaret. She didn't look back. The door closed. Alara dropped the poker. Her hands started shaking. Dorian caught her before her knees gave out. "I've got you," he murmured. "You're all right." "I hit him." Alara's voice was thin. "I could have killed him." "But you didn't. You protected us both." Dorian tilted her face up. "You saved my life, Alara." She started to cry then, not from fear, from relief, from the weight of years finally lifting. Dorian held her through it, steady and sure. When she finally stopped, she pulled back, wiping her eyes. "Sorry, Don't apologize." His thumb brushed her cheek. "Not for that. Not ever." Their eyes met. And this time, when Alara leaned in, he didn't pull away. The kiss was soft, tentative, a question more than an answer. When they broke apart, Dorian's expression was raw. "This complicates things," he said roughly. "I know. We have an arrangement. 1 year, then you're free." "I know," Alara repeated, "but I don't want—" He stopped. Started again. "I don't know if I can let you go." Alara's heart stuttered. "Then don't." The words hung between them, heavy with possibility. Then Dorian kissed her again, harder this time, and Alara kissed him back like she was drowning and he was air. When they finally pulled apart, the sun was setting, painting the empty house in shades of fire. "We should go," Dorian said. "Yes." Neither of them moved. "Alara." "I don't want 1 year," she blurted. "I want—" A crash from upstairs. They froze. Footsteps. Running. Dorian shoved Alara behind him. "Stay back!" The figure appeared at the top of the stairs. Not Margaret. Not one of the hired men. A woman. Young, maybe 20, with wild dark hair and torn clothes. She was bleeding from a cut above her eye. "Please," she gasped. "You have to help me. She's going to kill me." Then she collapsed. The woman hit the floor hard. Alara rushed forward before Dorian could stop her, dropping to her knees beside the crumpled figure. Blood smeared across the woman's temple, her breathing shallow and fast. "Get back," Dorian warned, scanning the stairs, the shadows. This could be a trap. "She's hurt." Alara pressed her hand against the wound, trying to staunch the bleeding. The woman's eyes fluttered open, brown, terrified, barely focusing. "Please," she whispered again. "Don't let her find me." "Who?" Alara demanded. "Who's trying to kill you?" Margaret Vance." The name came out broken. "I worked for her. Saw the documents. She's going to—" A door slammed somewhere in the house. Dorian moved instantly. "We're leaving. Now." He hauled the woman up with one arm, Alara supporting her other side. They stumbled toward the front door, the stranger's weight dragging between them. Outside, the street was empty. Late afternoon sun slanting long shadows. The carriage waited at the curb, driver already climbing down when he saw them. "Your Grace!" "Drive!" Dorian ordered, shoving the woman inside. "The estate! Fast!" They clattered away from the curb. Alara cradled the woman's head in her lap, pressing the hem of her cloak against the wound. The bleeding was slowing, but the woman's skin was clammy, her breathing ragged. What's your name? Alara asked gently. Sarah. Sarah Booth. She coughed. I was her lady's maid, found the papers 2 days ago, the forged will, other things, letters. I tried to leave and she sent those men after me. Why didn't you go to the authorities? Dorian asked. Sarah laughed weakly. Who'd believe a servant against a lady? I needed proof, took copies, hid them. Her eyes rolled back. St. Agnes Church, behind the loose brick in the... She went limp. Sarah. Alara shook her gently. The woman was still breathing, but unconscious. Dorian swore. When we get home, send for the doctor immediately. And my solicitor. You think she's telling the truth? I think Margaret just tried to have us killed in an empty house, so yes. I believe her. His jaw was tight. And if there's more evidence, we're going to find it before Margaret does. The carriage lurched over cobblestones. Alara held Sarah steady, mind racing. This was bigger than she'd thought. Not just a vindictive stepmother stealing an inheritance, something deeper, more dangerous. And now they were in the middle of it. When they reached the estate, the household erupted into controlled chaos. Mrs. Davison appeared with maids and hot water. The doctor arrived within 20 minutes, a grim-faced man who examined Sarah and pronounced her concussed but stable. She needs rest, he said, and someone watching her through the night. If she vomits or can't wake, send for me immediately. Annie volunteered before Alara could ask. I'll sit with her, Your Grace. Thank you. Alara squeezed the girl's hand. Dorian was already in his study with his solicitor, a sharp-eyed man named Pembroke, who'd arrived with a leather case full of documents. Alara left Sarah in Annie's care and went to join them. Dorian looked up when she entered. How is she? Alive. Resting. Alara closed the door behind her. What did I miss? Mr. Pembroke was just explaining why attempted murder is significantly harder to prove than fraud, Dorian said flatly. Pembroke adjusted his spectacles. Without witnesses willing to testify, Your Grace, it's your word against hers, and Mrs. Vance will claim self-defense, or that you misunderstood, or she hired men to kill us. Men who are likely long gone by now. And even if we find them, they'll say they were hired for legitimate security purposes and things got out of hand. Pembroke tapped his pen against the desk. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's messy, expensive, and it could drag on for years. What about the maid? Alara asked. Sarah said she has documents, proof. If we can find them, that changes things. Pembroke looked at her over his glasses. But churches are public spaces. If Mrs. Vance knows her maid had access to compromising materials, she'll be looking too. Then we go now, Dorian said. Tonight, before she has the chance. Your Grace, I must advise against... Noted. Dorian stood. But we're doing it anyway. Pembroke sighed. At least take someone with you, for witness purposes. I'll go, Alara said immediately. Both men looked at her. Absolutely not, Dorian said. Why not? Because it's dangerous. Because Margaret is clearly unstable. Because I'm your wife, and this is my fight too. Alara crossed her arms. You said we face things together, or was that just talk? Dorian's expression went from stubborn to reluctantly impressed. You're not going to back down on this, are you? No? Fine. But you stay close, and if things go wrong, you run. Understand? Yes. She's lying, Pembroke muttered. She won't run. Alara smiled. Probably not. St. Agnes Church sat in a quiet corner of Southwark, all gray stone and narrow windows. By the time they arrived, Dorian, Alara, and Pembroke, who'd insisted on coming despite his better judgment, full dark had fallen. The church door was unlocked. Inside, candles flickered in the nave, throwing shadows across empty pews. Somewhere, a clock ticked. Where would someone hide documents in a church? Pembroke whispered. Sarah said behind a loose brick, Alara said. So we look for loose bricks. They split up. Dorian took the north wall, Pembroke the south. Alara moved toward the altar, running her hands along the stone, feeling for anything that shifted. Nothing. She moved to the side chapel. More stone. More shadows. Then her fingers caught on something. A brick slightly recessed, worn edges. She pushed. It moved. "Here," she called softly. Dorian appeared at her elbow. He pulled the brick free carefully, reached into the gap behind it. His hand came out holding a leather portfolio. They moved to the vestry, a small room off the main chapel, and spread the contents on a table. Letters, bank statements, a second copy of the forged will with notes in the margins, clearly showing where signatures had been copied, and a ledger. Pembroke flipped through it, eyes widening. "This is extensive." "What is it?" Alara asked. "Your stepmother's financial records. Going back 6 years." He pointed to an entry. "She didn't just steal your inheritance, Your Grace. She's been embezzling from multiple estates, widows mostly, women who didn't have the resources to fight back." Alara's stomach turned. "How many?" "At least 7 that I can see here, probably more." Pembroke looked up. "This is criminal conspiracy. If we bring this to the authorities—" The vestry door slammed open. Margaret stood there, flanked by 4 men this time. Not hired thugs. Professionals, armed. "I knew you'd come here," she said calmly. "Sarah was always too clever for her own good." Dorian moved in front of Alara. "Walk away, Margaret. It's over." "No, it's just beginning." Margaret gestured to the men. "Take the documents and deal with them." The first man lunged for the portfolio. Pembroke grabbed it, stumbled back. The man followed. Dorian met the second with a fist that sent him reeling, but the third got behind him, arm around his throat. Alara didn't think. She grabbed a candlestick from the altar and swung hard. The man dropped. Dorian broke free, drove his elbow back into the fourth man's ribs. The crack echoed through the small space. Pembroke was backed into a corner, clutching the portfolio like his life depended on it, which it probably did. Margaret watched it all with cold calculation. Then she pulled a pistol from her cloak. Everyone froze. "Enough," she said quietly. "Give me the documents or I shoot the solicitor first, then your precious wife, then you." "You won't," Dorian said. "Too many witnesses. Too much noise." "Won't I?" Margaret cocked the hammer. "I've already lost everything. What's a murder charge on top of fraud?" She aimed at Pembroke. "Wait." Alara stepped forward. "You want the documents? Take them. Just let us go." "Alara?" Dorian started. "She's right," Alara said, not taking her eyes off Margaret. "It's over. We can't win this. Not here." Margaret smiled. Finally, some sense. Alara walked slowly toward Pembroke, hand outstretched for the portfolio. The solicitor looked at her like she'd lost her mind. She took the leather case, turned, and threw it directly at Margaret's face. The pistol went off. The shot went wide, punching into the wall. Margaret staggered back, cursing. Alara dove for the gun. They hit the floor together, grappling. Margaret was stronger than she looked, nails raking across Alara's cheek. Alara got her hand on the pistol, wrenched it free. Margaret's hand closed around her throat. Spots danced in Alara's vision. She couldn't breathe, couldn't. Dorian hauled Margaret off her, slammed her into the wall hard enough to rattle teeth. "Don't," he said, voice like death. "Touch my wife." Margaret sagged, all fight gone. Alara coughed, gasping for air. Pembroke had the portfolio again, knuckles white. The hired men were either unconscious or fled. Footsteps echoed in the nave. Heavy boots. The constables arrived in a rush of uniforms and authority. Someone must have heard the gunshot. "What's happening here?" the lead officer demanded. Pembroke stepped forward, miraculously composed despite everything. "Attempted murder and theft, Constable. We have evidence and witnesses." He handed over the portfolio. The constable flipped through it, expression darkening. "Mrs. Vance, you're under arrest." "On whose authority?" Margaret spat. "Mine." Dorian released her, stepped back. "And the Duke of Ashford's word carries quite a bit of weight, I'm told." They took her away in chains. Margaret didn't look back. The constable took statements from all 3 of them. It was nearly midnight by the time they were allowed to leave. Outside, the church bells tolled. The city was quiet, fog rolling in from the Thames. Alara stood on the steps, breathing in cold air that tasted like freedom. "You threw the portfolio at her," Dorian said. He sounded half amused, half horrified. "It worked, didn't it? You could have been killed. So could you." Alara turned to face him. We're even. He laughed, actually laughed. I suppose we are. Pembroke emerged, looking rumpled but satisfied. The constable says they'll likely charge her with embezzlement, forgery, and attempted murder. With the evidence we have, she'll go to prison. Years, possibly. Good, Alara said. She felt nothing. No triumph. No satisfaction. Just exhaustion. There's more, Pembroke continued. Once the court processes the forged will, your inheritance will be returned. The house, the investments, everything. You'll be independently wealthy, Your Grace. The title still felt strange, but for the first time it also felt earned. What about the other women? Alara asked. The ones she stole from? With this ledger, we can trace them. Make them whole again. Pembroke tucked the portfolio under his arm. It'll take time, but justice will be served. He excused himself to file additional paperwork. Alara and Dorian stood alone in the fog. You did it, Dorian said quietly. You beat her. We did it. No. He turned her to face him. This was you, your courage, your refusal to back down. I just provided support. Alara's throat tightened. I couldn't have done it without you. Maybe, but you would have found a way eventually. He brushed his thumb across the scratches on her cheek. You're remarkable, Alara. I hope you know that. She did. For the first time in her life, she actually did. Come on, Dorian said. Let's go home. Home? Yes, that's what it was now. The next week passed in a blur of legal proceedings and public revelation. The scandal broke wide. Duchess exposes stepmother's criminal empire. The newspapers had a field day. Society, predictably, was divided. Some rallied around Alara, a brave woman seeking justice, an inspiration. Others whispered that she was vindictive, unforgiving, that a true lady would have handled it privately. Alara discovered she didn't care what they thought. The turning point came at the Blackstone ball. Alara hadn't wanted to go. But Dorian insisted. They need to see you, he said. See that you're not broken, that you won. So she wore deep emerald silk that Madame Clairmont had created specifically for the occasion, let Annie arrange her hair in something elegant and complicated, and walked into the ballroom on Dorian's arm like she owned the place. The whispers started immediately, but this time they were different. Did you hear? She's recovered over £20,000 for the victims. Apparently the Queen herself sent a letter of commendation. Margaret Vance is facing 15 years in prison, and the Duchess never asked for a penny of reward, just justice. Lady Pemberton was there, of course. She approached with Caroline in tow, both looking like they'd swallowed glass. Your Grace, Lady Pemberton's curtsy was stiff. Congratulations on your victory. Thank you, Alara said evenly. I must admit, I underestimated you. Most people do. Lady Pemberton's mouth tightened, but she inclined her head and moved on. The Earl of Blackstone appeared next, much warmer. Duchess, well done. You've made quite the impression on society. I wasn't trying to impress anyone, which is precisely why you succeeded. He smiled. May I have this dance? Alara glanced at Dorian. He nodded. She let the Earl lead her onto the floor. The music swelled, a waltz. They moved through the steps, and Alara realized something strange. People were watching, but not with scorn, with curiosity, respect even. They're coming around, Blackstone said quietly. The ones who matter, anyway. You proved you're not just the Duke's charity case. You're formidable in your own right. I shouldn't have to prove anything. No, but this is the world we live in. He spun her gently. The question is, what will you do with it now that it's paying attention? Alara didn't have an answer. The dance ended. She returned to Dorian's side, breathless. All right? He asked. Actually, yes. More people approached throughout the evening, some genuine, some opportunistic. Alara learned quickly how to tell the difference. By the time they left near midnight, she was exhausted but strangely exhilarated. In the carriage, Dorian studied her. You were brilliant tonight. I barely said 2 words to half those people. You didn't have to. They saw you. really saw you, and they couldn't look away. He reached for her hand. That's power, Ilara. Real power. Not the kind that comes from a title. The kind you earn. She laced her fingers through his. What do I do with it? Whatever you want. His thumb traced patterns on her palm. You're free now. Financially independent, socially established. You could walk away from this marriage tomorrow and be perfectly fine. Ilara's heart clenched. Is that what you want? No. The word was immediate, fierce. But our arrangement was 1 year, and we're almost halfway through. I won't hold you to it if you want out. And if I don't want out? Dorian went very still. Then we renegotiate. To what? To whatever this is actually becoming. He cupped her face. I didn't plan on caring about you, Ilara, but I do. More than I should. More than is probably wise. That makes 2 of us, she whispered. He kissed her then, slow and deep and nothing like the chaste touches they'd shared before. This was real, raw, a promise of something neither of them had dared hope for. When they broke apart, Ilara was shaking. So, she said, voice unsteady. What now? Now, Dorian said. We stop pretending this is temporary. Just like that? Just like that, he smiled. Unless you have objections? Ilara thought about it. About the girl she'd been 6 months ago, cold, alone, convinced she'd never be anything more than a footnote in someone else's story. And the woman she was now, Duchess, fighter, someone who'd looked her demons in the face and won. No objections, she said. Good. Dorian pulled her close. Then let's go home and figure out what forever actually looks like. The next morning, Sarah woke up. Ilara was there when her eyes opened, sitting in the chair beside the bed. The maid looked around confused, then focused. Your Grace? You're safe, Ilara said immediately. Margaret's in prison. The documents you hid. They saved multiple women. You saved them. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. I thought I was going to die. You didn't. You survived, and now you get to decide what comes next. Ilara took her hand. I'd like to offer you a position here, not as a maid, as my personal secretary, someone I can trust. But only if you want it. You're free to go, with a reference and enough money to start fresh, anywhere you choose. Sarah stared at her. You'd do that? You risked your life to do the right thing. That deserves more than just survival. The tears spilled over. Yes, I'll stay. Thank you, Your Grace. Call me Ilara. Sarah smiled through the tears. Thank you, Ilara. When Ilara left the room, Dorian was waiting in the hallway. You're collecting strays now? He asked, amused. Says the man who married one. He laughed, pulled her close. Fair point. They stood there in the quiet hallway, sunlight streaming through the windows, and Ilara realized something. She was happy. Not perfect. Not without scars. But happy. And that was enough. That afternoon a letter arrived. Ilara opened it in the library, Dorian reading over her shoulder. It was from the Queen's private secretary. Her Majesty has taken note of your Grace's courage in pursuing justice against those who prey upon the vulnerable. She extends her personal commendation and invites you to a private audience at your earliest convenience. Ilara set the letter down carefully. The Queen wants to meet me, she said, voice faint. Of course she does. Dorian sounded proud. You're exactly the kind of person she respects. Someone who doesn't just accept the world as it is. Someone who changes it. I didn't change anything. You exposed a criminal, saved multiple families from ruin, proved that women without power can still fight back and win. He turned her to face him. That's everything, Ilara. Don't minimize it. She looked down at the letter, at the royal seal, at proof that she'd come further than she ever imagined possible. I'm scared, she admitted. Of what? Of losing this. Of waking up and finding out it was all a dream. It's not a dream. Dorian's arms tightened around her. It's real, you're real, and you earned every bit of it. Ilara leaned into him, breathing in the scent of soap and ink and safety. When did you stop seeing this as an arrangement? She asked quietly. Honestly? Dorian's voice rumbled in his chest. Probably the first night, when you stood in the rain and chose to trust me instead of giving up. I knew then that you were extraordinary. I just didn't know how to tell you. And now? Now I'm telling you every day, in every way I know how. He pulled back to look at her. I love you, Alara. Not because you're my Duchess, not because of what we've been through, but because you're you. Stubborn and brave and absolutely impossible to ignore. The words hit her like lightning. I love you too, she whispered, even though it terrifies me. Good. He kissed her forehead. Fear means you care enough for it to matter. Later that evening, they sat in the drawing room, fire crackling, comfortable silence between them. I've been thinking, Alara said. Dangerous. She smiled. About the other women, the ones Margaret stole from. They're getting their money back, but some of them are still alone, vulnerable. What if we created something, a foundation maybe, to help women in situations like that? Legal aid, financial advice, protection. Dorian looked at her with something like awe. You want to turn your experience into something that helps others. Is that naive? It's brilliant. He pulled her onto his lap. And we'll do it together, whatever you need. Even if it's expensive? Even then. Even if society thinks it's inappropriate? Especially then. He nuzzled her neck. We've already scandalized them. Might as well make it worthwhile. Alara laughed, feeling lighter than air. All right then, let's build something. Together, Dorian agreed. Outside, London settled into evening. Lights flickered in windows. The city hummed with life. And in the Ashford estate, in a drawing room filled with firelight and possibility, a woman who'd had nothing and a man who'd inherited everything began planning a future neither of them had expected, but both of them desperately wanted. The foundation took shape faster than Alara expected. Within 2 weeks, they'd secured offices in Bloomsbury, modest but respectable, 3 rooms on the second floor of a building that smelled like old books and ambition. Sarah proved invaluable, organizing correspondence and tracking down the women Margaret had victimized. By the end of the month, they'd helped 4 families reclaim stolen assets and connected 2 widows with solicitors willing to work on contingency. But it was the 5th case that changed everything. Mrs. Catherine Norwood appeared at their office on a gray Tuesday morning, clutching a crying infant and a carpet bag that looked like it held everything she owned. She was maybe 30, hollow-eyed, with bruises on her wrists that she tried to hide under long sleeves. I heard you help women, she said quietly. Women with nowhere else to go. Alara stood immediately. Come in, please, sit. The story came out in broken pieces. An abusive husband, money-controlled, withheld. A failed escape attempt that ended with Catherine locked in a room for 3 days. And now, finally, she'd gotten out, stolen away in the night with her daughter while he was drunk. I don't have anything, Catherine whispered. No money, no family. But I can't go back. If I go back, he'll kill me. You're not going back, Alara said firmly. We'll find you somewhere safe, get you legal representation, whatever you need. Why? Catherine's voice cracked. Why would you help me? You don't even know me. Because someone helped me once, Alara said, when I had nothing, and I'm not going to waste that chance by keeping it to myself. They found Catherine a room at a boarding house run by a widow who asked no questions. Pembroke took her case pro bono. Within a week, they had a restraining order. Within 2, divorce proceedings had begun. Catherine cried when Alara told her. I didn't think this was possible, she said. I thought I was trapped forever. You were never trapped, Alara said gently. Just lost. And now you're found. Word spread. By spring, they were handling 20 cases. By summer, 40. Women appeared at their door with stories that made Alara's blood boil. Theft, abuse, coercion, control. She listened to every single one, helped where she could, connected them with resources when she couldn't. And slowly, painfully, the foundation became something real. Dorian watched her throw herself into the work with a mixture of pride and concern. You're doing too much, he said one evening, finding her still at the office at 9 o'clock, papers spread across every surface. There's too much to do. You can't save everyone. I can try. Alara rubbed her eyes, exhausted. Do you know how many letters we got today? 37? 37 women desperate enough to write to a stranger asking for help? How do I say no to that? You don't. Dorian pulled up a chair, started sorting through papers with her. But you do hire more staff. Delegate. Build something sustainable instead of burning yourself out in 6 months. She knew he was right. But the thought of slowing down, of letting even one woman slip through the cracks because they didn't have capacity. I can't stop, she said quietly. Not when I know what it feels like to be them. Then don't stop. Just let me help you build it properly. He squeezed her hand. This is bigger than one person, Alara. It deserves to outlast us both. So they hired 3 more solicitors, a bookkeeper, 2 assistants to handle correspondence. Sarah became the office manager, sharp and efficient and absolutely fearless when dealing with difficult men. The foundation grew. And Alara grew with it. 6 months after opening their doors, they received an invitation that made Alara's hands shake. The Queen wants us to present at court, she said, staring at the heavy cardstock. Dorian looked up from his own correspondence. She's been watching what you're doing. I told you she would. This says we're to brief her personally on the Foundation's work and its impact on the realm. Alara set the invitation down carefully. That's not a social call. That's official. No, Dorian smiled. That's recognition. She's going to publicly endorse what you've built. We've built. You started it. I just provide funding and intimidation when necessary. Alara laughed despite her nerves. Your intimidation has been very helpful. I'm aware. He crossed to her, pulled her into his arms. You're going to be brilliant, just like you are at everything else. I'm terrified. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. He kissed her forehead. Besides, you've faced worse than the Queen. You faced Margaret and won. The trial had been brutal, but swift. Margaret pled guilty to avoid worse charges, received 12 years in prison. She'd tried to write Alara once from her cell, a rambling letter full of justifications and blame. Alara burned it unread. Some doors, once closed, needed to stay that way. The presentation at court was scheduled for a Thursday in late September. Alara wore deep blue silk, her hair arranged simply. Margaret's stolen diamonds finally returned to her, and immediately sold to fund the Foundation's expansion. Dorian stood beside her in the anteroom, looking calm. Alara wanted to pace, but forced herself to stand still. Breathe, he murmured. I am breathing. Slower. She tried, failed. Her heart was hammering so hard she thought everyone could hear it. The door opened. A courtier appeared. Her Majesty will see you now. The throne room was smaller than Alara expected. Intimate, almost. The Queen sat in a gilded chair, flanked by advisors, watching them approach with sharp, intelligent eyes. They bowed, curtsied. Your Majesty, Dorian said, Ashford, Duchess. The Queen's voice was crisp, authoritative. We've been following your Foundation's work with interest. Tell us more. Alara's mouth went dry. Then she saw it. A flicker of something in the Queen's expression. Not judgment, curiosity, and something that looked almost like approval. She straightened. Your Majesty, women across the realm are being systematically victimized by those in power over them. Husbands, guardians, trustees. The law provides little protection and less recourse. We're trying to change that. By providing what, exactly? Legal representation, safe housing, financial literacy, and most importantly, proof that they're not alone, that fighting back is possible. One of the advisors shifted uncomfortably. Your Majesty, with respect, encouraging women to challenge their husbands could undermine the social order. The social order, the Queen interrupted, still looking at Alara, has allowed men to brutalize women for centuries under the guise of propriety. If that's the order being undermined, I fail to see the problem. The advisor went silent. How many women have you helped? The Queen asked. 63 directly, but the ripple effect is larger. Women are talking to each other, sharing information, realizing they have options. Alara's voice steadied. We're not trying to destroy marriage or family, Your Majesty. We're trying to make those institutions safe for the women inside them. The Queen studied her for a long moment. Then she nodded. We are making you a royal patron of your foundation, effective immediately. You will have access to Crown resources, legal advisors, and our personal endorsement. She paused. Use it well, Duchess. And understand, this is not charity. This is investment in a better realm for our daughters. Alara's knees nearly buckled. Your Majesty, Thank you. We won't waste this. See that you don't. The Queen's expression softened fractionally. You remind us of ourself at your age, told we couldn't, shouldn't, wouldn't survive if we tried. We proved them wrong. So will you. It was a dismissal and a benediction all at once. Alara curtsied deeply. They backed out of the throne room, protocol demanding they not turn their backs on the monarch. In the hallway, Alara grabbed Dorian's arm. Did that just happen? Yes. The Queen just made you untouchable. Dorian looked dazed. Every critic, every skeptic, they can't touch you now. You have the Crown's backing. We have the Crown's backing. No, love. He cupped her face. This is yours. You earned it. Own it. The news broke the next morning. Queen names Duchess of Ashford, Royal Patron of Women's Aid Foundation. The headlines screamed. The papers were full of it, some praising, some skeptical, but all acknowledging the seismic shift in what was possible. Donations poured in, letters of support from across the realm, and inevitably, backlash. Lord Hathaway wrote an editorial calling the foundation dangerous radicalism that would destroy the fabric of English family life. Alara read it over breakfast, set it aside calmly, and dictated a response to Sarah that was published 3 days later. It was measured, factual, and devastating, pointing out that Lord Hathaway had 3 mistresses, 2 illegitimate children he refused to acknowledge, and a wife who'd fled to the continent to escape him. He didn't write again. But others did. The attacks came from predictable quarters, men threatened by change, women convinced the old ways were better, clergy certain that suffering was virtuous. Alara weathered them all, because for every attack there were 10 letters from women thanking her, sharing their stories, asking for help, and she helped every single one she could. The foundation expanded to Manchester, then Edinburgh. Within a year, they had offices in 6 cities, 40 staff members, and a waiting list of women desperate for assistance. Alara hired a director to manage day-to-day operations. She couldn't be everywhere, couldn't handle every case personally, but she could build something that would last. You've changed the world, Dorian said one evening, watching her review applications for a new office in Dublin. I've changed a small part of it, Alara corrected. The world's still broken in 1,000 other ways, but less broken than it was. Because of you. She looked up at him. 2 years since that rainy night when he'd found her on the street. 2 years of building something neither of them had imagined. Because of us, she said softly. I couldn't have done any of this alone. Maybe not, but you would have tried. Dorian pulled her to her feet, into his arms. That's who you are. Someone who sees a problem and refuses to look away. Is that a compliment? It's a fact. He kissed her gently, and I love you for it. The words still made her chest ache in the best way. I love you too, she said, even when you're being insufferably proud of me. I'm always going to be proud of you. Better get used to it. That winter, Sarah came into Alara's office with a telegram, face pale. What is it? Alara asked immediately. Margaret. Sarah's voice shook. She's dead. Illness. They found her this morning in her cell. Alara sat down slowly. She'd expected to feel something, relief, maybe, or vindication. Instead, there was just emptiness. Are you all right? Sarah asked. I don't know. Alara stared at the telegram. She spent her entire life trying to control people, and she died alone in a prison cell with nothing. I should be happy. But you're not. I'm sad. The admission surprised her. Not for her, but for what she could have been if she'd chosen differently, if she'd used that intelligence for something other than cruelty. Sarah was quiet for a moment. You're a better person than I am, Your Grace. I'm relieved she's gone. So am I, Elara admitted. But I'm also sad that relief is all she left behind. She told Dorian that night, curled up in bed together. Do you want to go to the funeral? He asked. No, she wouldn't want me there anyway. Elara traced patterns on his chest. But I want to do something. Plant a tree, maybe. Something living, so she's not just forgotten. Even after everything she did to you? Especially because of that. Elara met his eyes. I don't want to become her. Don't want hate to be the thing that defines me. If I can remember her and still choose kindness, then she didn't win. Not really. Dorian pulled her closer. You are extraordinary, do you know that? You keep saying that, because it keeps being true. They planted an oak tree on the estate grounds the following week. Small, but strong. Sarah was there, and Pembroke and Annie. No prayers, no ceremony, just acknowledgement that a life had ended, flawed and cruel, but human nonetheless. To second chances, Elara said quietly, touching the young tree's trunk. And the people who never got them. It felt right. The foundation continued to grow. By their third anniversary, they'd helped over 500 women, changed laws in 3 counties, influenced parliamentary debates on marriage and property rights. And through it all, Elara and Dorian built something else, a partnership that went deeper than duty or arrangement. They fought sometimes, disagreed on strategy, on priorities, on how hard to push. Dorian thought Elara worked too much. Elara thought Dorian was too cautious about political battles. But they always came back to each other, always chose to stay. On a bright morning in May, Elara woke to find Dorian already dressed, standing by the window. What are you doing up so early? She asked, stretching. Thinking. About? He turned to her, expression serious. Our arrangement. The 1-year deal we made. Elara's heart stuttered. What about it? It's been 3 years, and we never officially ended it. Never renegotiated terms. He moved to sit on the edge of the bed. I think we should fix that. Fix what? Dorian pulled a small box from his pocket, opened it. Inside was a ring, simple gold band with a single emerald. I gave you a ring once because I had to, he said, because it was part of a contract. I want to give you this one because I choose to, because I love you, because I want you to be my wife, not for a year or a decade, but forever. Elara's vision blurred. We're already married, she managed. Legally, yes, but I want you to choose it. Choose me, not because you needed shelter or security or a way out, but because you want to. His voice roughened. Marry me again, Elara, for real this time, in front of everyone, as equals. She couldn't speak, could only nod. Dorian slid the ring onto her finger beside the original band. Is that a yes? Yes. The word came out choked. Yes, you impossible man. Of course, yes. He kissed her then, deep and thorough and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, Elara was laughing through tears. When? She asked. Whenever you want. Small ceremony or full spectacle. Your choice. Small, Elara said immediately. Just us and the people who matter. No performance. Perfect. Dorian pulled her close. Though I should warn you, the people who matter now include about 40 staff members and several hundred women who consider you their personal hero. That's not small. No, he grinned. But it's honest. And that's what we do now, isn't it? Live honestly. She thought about the girl she'd been 3 years ago. Alone, broke, convinced she'd never matter to anyone. And the woman she was now. Duchess, advocate, fighter, loved. Yes, Elara said. That's exactly what we do. They held the ceremony 6 weeks later in the estate chapel. Sarah stood as witness. Pembroke gave Elara away, since she had no family left to ask. The staff lined the pews, every maid, footman, cook, and gardener who'd watched Elara transform from frightened stranger to confident duchess. And in the front row sat 20 women the foundation had helped. Catherine Norwood held her daughter, now 2 years old and thriving. A widow named Eleanor who'd reclaimed her stolen pension. A young woman named Mary who'd escaped a forced engagement and now studied law. They were there because Elara had fought for them, and they stayed because she'd shown them how to fight for themselves. Alara walked down the aisle in ivory silk, simpler than the first dress, but infinitely more meaningful. Dorian waited at the altar, and when he saw her, his eyes went bright. The vicar began, but this time, when they spoke their vows, every word was chosen. Meant, I promise to stand with you, Alara said, in every battle, every victory, every moment of doubt, not because I have to, but because I want to, because you're mine and I'm yours, and that's worth fighting for. I promise to see you, Dorian said. Always, not as a title or a role or what society expects, but as Alara, the woman who refused to give up, who changed the world because she refused to accept it as it was. I love you, not despite your strength, but because of it. They exchanged rings, his original band and her new one, symbols of obligation transformed into choice. I now pronounce you husband and wife, the vicar said, smiling. Again. The chapel erupted in applause. Dorian kissed her thoroughly, and Alara kissed back, surrounded by people who'd become family, building a future she'd never dared imagine. When they finally pulled apart, breathless and grinning, Sarah was crying. Half the women in the pews were crying. Alara was crying too. But for the first time in her life, they were happy tears. The reception was held in the gardens. Tables set up under trees, food and music and laughter. No rigid protocol, no performance. Just people celebrating people. Catherine found Alara as the sun was setting, bathing everything in gold. Thank you, she said simply, for everything, for showing me I could leave, that I deserved better. You always deserved better, Alara said. I just helped you see it. No. Catherine shook her head. You did more than that. You gave me my life back, and now I'm going to live it, for me and for her. She gestured to her daughter, playing with other children nearby. She's going to grow up knowing she has choices. Because you existed. Alara's throat closed. That's all I ever wanted, for women to know they have choices. They do now because of you. Later, as the stars came out and the music slowed, Dorian found Alara standing alone by the fountain. Hiding? He asked. Thinking. About? She turned to him. About how 3 years ago I was ready to disappear, just vanish into London and let the world forget I ever existed. And now? Now I matter. She said it with wonder, not because of you, though that helps, but because I chose to matter, chose to fight, chose to build something that outlasts me. You've changed hundreds of lives, Alara. No, she shook her head. I've shown them how to change their own lives. There's a difference. Dorian pulled her into his arms, swaying gently to the distant music. You know what I love most about you? What? You never settled. Not for poverty, not for abuse, not for a convenient marriage. You kept pushing until you found something real. He kissed her temple. You made me want to be real too, not just the Duke, not just the soldier, but Dorian, the man who loves you. I do love you, Alara said. More than I thought I could love anyone. You gave me shelter when I needed it. But more than that, you gave me room to become who I was supposed to be. We did that for each other. Yes. She rested her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. We really did. They danced until the music stopped, until the guests drifted away, until it was just the two of them under the stars, exactly where they were meant to be. The foundation continued for decades. Long after Alara and Dorian were gone, it still stood, helping women, changing laws, proving that power didn't have to mean control. That strength could look like compassion. Sarah ran it for 15 years before training her successor. Catherine became a solicitor, taking on cases the foundation referred. Mary became a magistrate, the first woman in her county to hold the position. The women Alara helped went on to help others. And the ripples spread. But that was later. For now, on this perfect evening, Alara Vance, no longer forgotten, no longer afraid, stood in her husband's arms and knew with absolute certainty that she'd found exactly what she'd been searching for. Not rescue, not safety, but partnership, purpose, power used for good instead of harm, and love. So much love. Happy? Dorian murmured against her hair. Alara smiled, pulling him closer. Impossibly. Good. He kissed her softly. Because you deserve impossible happiness, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you get it. Even when I'm difficult? Especially then. She laughed, the sound bright and free in the warm night air. Somewhere above them, stars wheeled through the darkness. The world kept turning, full of problems still to solve, battles still to fight. But for this moment, in this garden, two people who'd started as strangers bound by obligation had become something infinitely more precious. A team. A force. A love story written in defiance of every expectation. Alara had walked into a storm 3 years ago, desperate and alone. And she'd walked out the other side transformed. Not because someone saved her, but because she'd learned to save herself. And then, impossibly, miraculously, found someone who wanted to build a life with her. Not in spite of her strength, but because of it. That was the real victory. Not the title. Not the foundation. Not even the justice she'd won against Margaret. But this. Choosing to stay. Choosing to fight. Choosing to believe that she deserved more than survival. Choosing love. And being chosen in return. As the last lanterns flickered out and the garden settled into peaceful darkness, Alara and Dorian walked back to the house hand in hand. Behind them, the foundation they'd built stood strong. Ahead of them, a future they'd forged together. And in between, this moment, perfect and hard-won and utterly, completely theirs. It was enough. It was everything. It was home.